that by the time Black women are 45 years old, that biologically they have aged 7.5 times faster than their white female counterparts. And here's the thing, you can feel it in your body. You know you've been overworking. You know you've been ignoring yourself. And you know that it's just not worth it. This is the Return to Presence podcast, where we sit at the feet of Black women, past and present. I'm talking trailblazers, quiet disruptors, and everyday revolutionaries. Through their oral histories, our ancestors and elders left us a blueprint for healing, leading, and living with intention. I'm Dr. Shawna Murray Brown, a cultural historian, psychotherapist, and liberatory strategist, here to help us uncover their lessons and carry their wisdom forward. Let's get into it. Hey y'all, welcome to the very first episode of the Return to Presence podcast. And I am so excited to share this with y'all. Listen, you don't understand. I've been sitting on this for about 3 years. What started as a class on oral histories and a doctoral program led me to this idea of sharing some of the wisdoms of Black women, sharing their insights from over 100 years ago to today with you. And so, you might be wondering, what is return to presence? What does that actually mean? And what I want you to consider is what it means for you to be grounded in your body, what it means for you to be able to access your original wisdoms, what it means for you to be able to honor and respect yourself in all the spaces that you lead. This podcast will create experiences for you to contend with small clips of elder Black women that I had the honor of communing with through my dissertation research. And then we'll build on that and figure out how can we apply their wisdoms in our day-to-day life. And so you might be wondering, well, Dr. Shawna, what exactly is oral histories? Now, I know you're familiar with storytelling, but oral histories and storytelling actually aren't the same thing. Oral history is a methodology and a field of study, and it's focused on essentially honoring the lived experience of folks as they remember it. Where storytelling might be adding a little fluff, getting a little creative, oral histories is often archived and supported and owned by not only the storyteller or the narrator, but also the oral historian capturing it. And so I want you to understand that the small clips that we'll be communing with today aren't the oral history. They are just a glimpse into it. And because I am so grateful for the support of the Schlesinger Library at Harvard University for allowing us access to this wealth of information, I gotta shout them out, and you will be able to find all of the information associated in the show notes. Let me introduce you to the lady of our session, and that is Dr. Anna Arnold Hedgeman. Anna Arnold Hedgeman was born in Marshalltown, Iowa. The eldest of 7, she was raised in Minnesota in a predominantly white town. She attended public school, y'all, and was the first African American to graduate with a degree from Hamline University in 1922. Her first job was at a historically Black institution, Rust College in Holly Springs, Mississippi. The experience was staunchly different from her, y'all, because this was the first time she was encountering segregation in the Deep South. She maintained her teaching role there for 2 years, committing her life and career to the improvement of life experiences and education for Black folks. Now, from 1924 to 1934, she worked as an executive with the YWCA in Ohio, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. She assumed roles in governmental agencies, worked at the National Council for Permanent Fair Employment Practices Commission, and even became a cabinet member. Anna Arnold Hedgeman helped to organize the 1963 March on Washington, and in other ways helped to prepare the climate that made possible the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Bill. Her first book, The Trumpet Sounds, was published in 1964, and her second book, The Gift of Chaos was published in 1977. At the time of the interview, she was working as a consultant on education for African American studies and urban affairs. And so during our experience today, we're going to zoom in on some of her experiences that began as early as 1924. We're going to consider how her leadership at the YWCA and leading this organization and raising the most money they had ever raised at the time, even though she was only leading the African American side of the YWCA in New York City at the time. So some of the things that I expect us to be able to pay close attention to as we listen to this oral history is what comes up for us as we think about our lived experience, present day, navigating leadership in predominantly white organizations. I want us to consider how well we're actually taking care of ourselves and some of the lessons that we can garner from what Dr. Anna Arnold Hedgeman has to say about this particular journey in New York City at the YWCA at the time. Let's listen in.
It didn't go along with his dignity, the dignity of the Young Women's Christian Association. But I had other ideas. Well, we raised more money than they'd ever raised before. And there was a big community chest meeting planned, and we were supposed to report. And we got the women ready to report, and we had this money all listed. We were so thrilled we didn't know what to do. 2 o'clock in the afternoon of the day of the community fund dinner, telephone call, and it's my executive. That stutter that comes with white folks' tongue when they know they have to say something and very unpleasant that shouldn't be true. I have to tell you that your women can't come tonight to the community fund meeting. I said, can't come? I thought we were all supposed to report, and we have the biggest report the branch has ever had. She said, yes, but the board of trustees has ruled that you cannot come to that dinner. So I said, well, I'm going to stand on the street corner and give all these people back their money. And I really meant to do it. She said, wait a minute. She said, I'll be right over. So she came over and sat at my desk. I'll never forget it. I pulled out the membership card. I said, I thought I was coming to work for a Christian organization concerned with the development of relationships. And you tell me that this part of the fellowship cannot report tonight? Well, I tell you very honestly, I'm returning the money. I wouldn't dare turn their money in this situation. So she went back. I don't know what she did, but she called later and said that she'd gotten the agreement that 2 of us could come. And that was the first time I had ever realized the asset that color can be sometime. So we had a meeting. I called the women, and they came, the board meeting. I told them the situation. I said, I don't want to go, frankly. So they said, yes, you're going. You're our executive. But we're going to send Bertha Culie with you. Bertha Culie was the treasurer. And she was good and brown. They couldn't miss her. She said, the reason we're doing that is if we just let you go, they may put you in the corner someplace and nobody will quite realize fully that you're there. So Miss Cooley was to meet me. She was a former teacher, as elegant as she could be, and as sensible as any person I ever knew. And she knew funds, and if there was any question, she would be prepared to answer. So I was thrilled. There was a big clock in the municipal auditorium, and we were to meet there. I stood there and waited and waited. We were due in at 6 o'clock, and at 6 o'clock, Bertha Culie had not come. I called her home to learn that she had dropped dead on the way to the dinner. At that time, as far as I was concerned, they had killed her. Now, it wasn't that simple. She had a heart condition, and the stress was very great, so it was an additional stress she didn't need. But as far as I was concerned, they'd killed her, and I said so. They sent me to Chicago for 2 weeks vacation to get myself together. And I went because I was so desperate. And I came back and decided to go to summer school in New York that year. In the meantime, the women did report. Bertha Culie reported. They all knew she was there, and they had to accept it. So that much was accomplished. But we couldn't get it.
Bertha Culie dropped dead.
Yeah, on the way to the dinner.
Yeah, but as far as they were concerned, when?
They were concerned that we had nobody to make the meeting, and I saw to it that the announcement that Bertha Culie was dead was made in the meeting. They wanted to suppress that. It wasn't a part of the whole thing. Announced that she was dead. And of course they were all embarrassed, and I was so glad of it I didn't know what to do.
You didn't go.
I went.
You went?
Yeah.
Saw to
I was there. You see, when I called, they found she was dead. So there was nothing to do but go in, and everybody knew I was there.
Yes.
But I saw to it that they made the announcement of her death and described the kind of work she had done for the association. So she accomplished more in death than she would have accomplished in life.
Yes, and they certainly knew you
That
were
didn't
there.
mean anything to me.
Yes.
Yeah, and they knew I was there. They had to face that. I went to Chicago, stayed the 2 weeks, came back, and I began to press for the opportunity for our girls to use the gymnasium and for them to have other opportunities.
Did y'all hear that? Did y'all feel that? Imagine doing all of that work for an institution that doesn't really have your back, being twice as good, advocating for yourself, only to collapse and die on the way to receive your proverbial flowers. Now, we know this story. We know the truth of the matter. We know that when we think about and listen to the story of Bertha Culie, that either ourselves or our friends, our colleagues are navigating the very same thing. This happened around 1924, y'all. And we have just leapt into 2025. That means 100 years ago, we were struggling with the very same things. Did you hear Anna Arnold Hedgeman talk about how they decided that they weren't going to let her come to the conference to be able to share their successes? Did you hear how she had to threaten to give their money back in order for them to just allow 2 seats at the table? I've had enough. I remember when I heard this oral history the very first time, and I remember sitting and tears falling down my face. Because what we know is that if we take a look at the news from last year, late 2024, headlines saying at least 19 CEOs died on the job, or 2 Black women university presidents collapsed, or if we take a look at the data around the chronic illnesses that Black women are now enduring, that we can clearly delineate, clearly draw a line to the overwhelming stress and racism that they're enduring. There's a theory developed by Dr. Arlene Geronimus. It's called the weathering hypothesis. And what this weathering hypothesis suggests and has found is that Black women are aging at an accelerated rate. That by the time Black women are 45 years old, that biologically they have aged 7.5 times faster than their white female counterparts. And here's the thing, you can feel it in your body. You know you've been overworking. You know you've been ignoring yourself. And you know that it's just not worth it. And so one of the things that I like to sit with, and if I had the opportunity to sit and communicate with Dr. Anna Arnold Hedgeman or Bertha Culie, is I would want to ask her if she felt like it was worth it. Anna Arnold Hedgeman said at the end of this clip that perhaps she made a greater difference, that perhaps Bertha Culie made a greater difference in her death than she did in life. I don't like it. I don't think it's worth it, y'all. But you can be the one to contend with that. What do you think? And so I'd like to take a moment and invite you to get back into your body as you contemplate as you consider the relevance of Bertha Culie's experience, of Anna Arnold Hedgeman's experience in your day-to-day life. I invite you to take a moment as you're listening or watching and breathe in, filling your belly with air for a moment, holding it, and slowly exhaling out. You know, the weight of being the first or being the only can be so great. So let's take another big, deep breath in, filling your belly with air, holding it for a moment, and slowly exhaling out. What is Anna Arnold Hedgeman's lesson for us today? What did they know that perhaps we've forgotten? Do you think that if you'd heard this story at the beginning of your career, that you would still engage with your work life in the way that you do? Do you think that perhaps you would have the practice of really grounding yourself regularly and setting more solid boundaries? Now it's time for the presence practice, where I share what rose up in me and what it might mean for how we live today. Hey, y'all. So, since we're talking about all of the insights that can be garnered from Anna Arnold Hedgeman's story, especially as it relates to Bertha Culie and, what it means when we overwork ourselves to a point of the end of our life, I wanted to know some more. So I picked up this book. It's called Until There Is Justice by Jennifer Scanlon. And for those that are watching live, you see me holding the book, but I wanted to know more about what Anna Arnold Hedgeman actually had to say. And I had a hard time getting access to the books that she wrote. And so I figured, why not get this biography, so that I could learn more. And so in the front of the book, there is a quote, and I'm going to read it to y'all. It says, "We will not rest until there is justice in our beloved country, and we know that as justice comes to all Americans, it will come in increasing measure to the people of the world." This is something Anna Arnold Hedgeman actually wrote in her text, The Trumpet Sounds. And when I think about that, it makes me think about my experience when I was working as a social worker in the city of Baltimore, right? I really thought that I was about to help my people. You know what I mean? I made the decision that I was doing what I was doing for Black folks. And I was super committed to doing whatever was necessary. Now, I'm not going to lie. I started my education first in like an internship kind of dynamic. And I really thought that I had it going on. I thought I really understood what it took for me emotionally to be able to do the good work. But when I actually got that job, y'all, like after I graduated and was no longer working as an intern, what initially was me working with one or two families in Department of Social Services turned into me working with a lot of families. And it deeply impacted me. And that means like every single day, like I was coming home and I was weeping, I was crying. I genuinely loved the children and families that I was serving. I could see myself, my mama, in the lived experiences of the women and children that I was serving. And so when I left that job, I felt for sure I had interrupted this pattern of giving so much that it made me sick, right? I thought that I had almost like beat this pattern, this system of, overworking, because I wasn't in a 9 to 5 or 9 to 9 job anymore. But when I fast forward to just 6 or 7 years ago, right, I was full-time in a doctorate program. I had just had a baby. I was running my grassroots community healing practice, managing multiple six figures and grant funds. I was doing all of this work. And I decided when I became a doctorate student that I was not going to close down my community work. I was super clear about that. But in order for me to not stop doing my community healing work, it meant that I had to overwork. I had to overgive. And there were these concepts in my mind that align to what Anna Arnold Hedgeman is talking about here. She's talking about not resting until we meet with success. And I had internalized that perspective, similar to Bertha Culie, who I imagine when she was working with Anna Arnold Hedgeman. She was doing it out of a semblance of survival, like we have to do this for our people. And many of us, if you're like me, I took that to heart. I take that sentiment of working until we meet with freedom, until we win really seriously. But it should never mean that I take it to the point of becoming sick. And that's what happened, right? My first year in my doctorate program, I was running on fumes. Drop 1-year-old off, go to school, get off of school, go work with my nonprofit, go home, write papers while breastfeeding my child, and then do it all over again. That ran out. I was running on zero by the time I graduated with my doctorate a couple years ago. And I woke up one morning, my feet were tingling. I couldn't feel my fingers. Was going to the doctor, and they didn't know what to do. I had really run myself ragged and literally did a semblance of what Miss Anna Arnold Hedgeman is telling us about when she's talking about this teaching around Bertha Culie. And so I want to talk about, one of the many practices that I did to shift my mindset, to interrupt this idea of this concept of martyrdom, that we have to be martyrs and we have to sacrifice our very own lives for the lives of others. Because I imagine that when we do the work now, that we're doing it so that we can actually see and experience the fruits of our labor. All right, so the way that I've often addressed this in the early stages of my reflection of me needing to create another relationship with work, another relationship with social justice, with social impact work, is to think about those inner thoughts that I have about why I must be the only one to do it and what could happen. And so if you're watching me, you see that I am holding napkins in my hand. I have a roly pen. You know them fancy like gel pens that we used to have as a kids? And then I have some water. And what I tend to do is a release ritual. It's a way of literally writing down concepts or ideas that you hold in your mind and then releasing them to the water, allowing them to dissolve. And so I'm literally going to do it here. And I encourage you to make up your own version of this. It might mean that maybe you're not putting it in water. Maybe you're burning it. Please do that outside. Okay. We don't want nothing blowing up. But so one of the underlying negative things that I held in my mind, and it was negative for me, is that if I don't do it, no one will. This is a lie, right? But we genuinely believe that if we don't do it, nobody else will. Another is, first I'm gonna rip this. You see, if I don't do it, no one will. Or, I can do bad all by myself. We've heard this before. I've also had the thought around, you know, if I stop doing what I'm doing, then folks will forget about me. If I slow down, what will people think of me? So really taking those ideas, those negative thoughts, those falsehoods, y'all, because we know for sure that if I don't, that the thought of if I don't do it, no one else will. No, there's always another person willing to do the work. Now, are we positioned to be able to connect with them? I can do bad all by myself. Actually, you ain't never doing bad by yourself, because if we think from a collectivist perspective, then we know that we actually doing bad together. And so after you write those things down to do the release intention, sometimes we can rip it up, and maybe that feels like enough, but it doesn't usually feel like enough for me. I like to do a release ritual where I'm saying I'm no longer going to hold on to this particular way of thinking, knowing, and being. And I'm giving it to the water. I'm giving it to nature. And I literally take the thing and put it in the water, allowing it to dissolve into nothing. And you'll see over time, right, as you're doing this, the water will begin to turn the color of whatever. Sometimes I do this with markers when I'm working with children. But yeah, I encourage you to do this activity either with fire or, with water like this, and then pour it out and let it go. So, listen, the space in the return to presence doesn't just end here. I want to invite you onto our Patreon page to reflect through some of these sort of guiding questions. Chat with us about what comes up for you as you think about Bertha Culie and Anna Arnold Hedgeman's experience and leadership. Tell me, what would you have done differently if you were Anna Arnold Hedgeman? Would you have advocated for Bertha Culie in the same way? Do you think that our life is worth our legacy in this particular way? I'm still sitting with it. I'm still sharing and changing the way that I move through my work-life balance. And in the Return to Presence podcast, hopefully you'll be able to gain some more skills to be able to fortify this. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube and follow me on Patreon and wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I'm really excited because the next time we'll be talking about Miss Pleasant Harrison. We'll be talking about audacity, navigating the healthcare experience, and how to ensure that we're actually honoring ancestral wisdom. See you then.